Hi, we are so glad to have Damien Larkin back on Loose Leaf Authors today. And we're just going to jump right in because I've been waiting to talk to you for a while now. Just to remind our listeners, Big Red came out a year or two ago, and his second book, Blood Red Sun, the sequel prequel, which we'll get into, is coming out on July 6th. And I'm really excited about it. So, first off, tell us what you've been doing for the last, it's probably been a year almost since we.
Yeah, it must be about that. Yeah. So, I mean, first off, thanks very much for having me back again, Charity. It's great to chat to you after all this time. I had loads of fun on the last one, so it's just really excited about this one. But yeah, I mean, look, it's been a busy year. I think it's been a busy year for a lot of us, given the circumstances. So, I think like everyone else, I've just been doing my best, kind of keeping my head down, getting stuck into work, and kind of writing and stuff. But a lot of it has been kind of set, I suppose, towards like getting ready for the launch of Blood Red Sand, which is, I'm really excited about. It's coming out now on the 6th of July. So, but yeah, it's a bit of a strange one because, like, you know, some people are calling it a prequel in the sense that it is set like 20 years before the early events of Big Red. And then other people are calling it like a sequel because like, thanks to the time travel element, it is kind of like a sequel for some of the characters involved. So I'm just trying to meet everyone kind of like in the middle and calling it a pre-sequel.
Yes.
A phrase coined by my friend Pamela Livingston. But yeah, I think that's the best way of kind of putting it. You know, it can be considered a prequel, it can also be considered a sequel. You know, so I'll let the readers decide on that one.
Yes. Well, I actually love that because it is because of the time differences and the whole everything that kind of goes along with that compression travel hollow program. And I'll just be honest, it totally blew my mind.
Thank you.
I have more questions now. I mean, there were like one or two sort of questions answered I didn't know I had.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, okay, I hope you're working on book 3 because I'm ready.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I've got a good few stories to go in the overall universe. So I think at this point in time, I'm waiting to kind of gauge what the reaction is to Blood Red Sand, because it's very different from Big Red that just kind of followed the point of view of one character, where this one is you get the third person kind of interactions from different characters. So I think more than anything, I'm intrigued to see what the reactions are to some of the surprises I have in place, and then I'll kind of make the decision on what way I'm going to go with it. So I have everything kind of mapped out for the direct sequel to Blood Red Sand, and it's under the working title of Blood Red Steel. So it kind of follows on with those types of characters in Blood Red Sand, but I do want to do a direct kind of sequel to Big Red as well, which again just picks up where we left off with that character Dub Lachlan. So again, that one's under the working title of Born Red, and it's something I really want to dive into it, but I've kind of struggled with a little bit. I've done 3 drafts of that book, and I've scrapped all 3 of them. So it's just,
oh goodness.
I think I just need to go back with a clear head, and I figured there's no point kind of worrying about it now with the launch of a book, because I can't really kind of concentrate or give it the time and attention that I want to when I have like a launch kind of hanging over to me. But yeah, I mean, I am going to write them. It's just a matter of in what order and when.
Right. Well, and the nice thing, you have this freedom with your order that a lot of authors don't have. So that's kind of cool. A built-in safety net.
Exactly. And I think that's why I kind of wanted to mix it up, because I don't want to necessarily tell the same order and the same kind of stories in that order. I wanted to kind of keep things fresh and mix it up. And I suppose one of the things that kind of I think people enjoyed about Big Red was that it's told from one kind of person's perspective, and it's a very unique one as well. Specifically, it's an Irish person, and he's not like a gung-ho kind of warrior, like with a cigar kind of hanging out and like big muscles and ripped. He's just an average kind of normal dude. Whereas kind of people said they enjoyed the battle scenes, but you're only really seeing it from his perspective. So there's a couple of epic battles that I suppose people kind of missed out on, and that's what I want to do with Blood Red Sand. I wanted it to kind of have that kind of overview of the things that were going on, to get into the nitty and gritty and the darker side of stuff that I couldn't really capture with kind of Big Red. So I'm very happy with it.
Yeah, I was going to say that's another way the 2 books were different. Big Red had a little bit more of the storyline. There were things going on in between the battle scenes, and Blood Red Sand was just high octane, full force. You were in the trenches. Everybody's dying, gruesome deaths, but you just keep pushing and pushing. So you get to see, like you said, that different side of war and the battles and everything. So I found it fascinating.
Thank you.
And like I said in my review, all I could think was high octane, just
Yeah.
full steam ahead, explosions, everything. And so, yeah, I was
Thank you.
telling my son about it. He's 14 and he's like, I might have to read that.
Brilliant. Yeah. And then, to be honest, that's exactly what I kind of wanted to do, because I think when I was writing it, it was a very kind of busy time in kind of work in my life. And I think I had a lot of kind of frustrations, and I kind of just used kind of Blood Red Sand to kind of vent some of that stuff. So I
Yes.
did want that high octane. I wanted that like constant boom, boom, boom. It's unrelenting, like machine gun fire, and I wanted to put those characters in these god awful, like horrible situations, where it's just going from bad to worse, because I think like in a lot of kind of like wars, that's how it goes. It's never kind of like we're going to go in, take out the enemy, happy days, it's going to work out. There's always like these challenges and kind of unexpected scenarios kind of coming at you. So that's pretty much what I wanted to do. So
Well, and it's true that's just how life works in general.
yeah,
Whenever you
exactly.
think you've got a plan, everything's going to go wrong. I mean, they come out of space and they're attacked immediately, and all the ships are basically destroyed and they crash, and
you
just go from there. So
yeah,
I
pretty
loved it.
much. Thank you very much. I'm glad to hear that.
It was a good break from all my romance reading I've been doing. I was like, oh yes. So
mix it up a little bit.
Yes. Well, and I totally feel your need to kind of use the writing medium to work through your own emotions, because I've felt the same way the last month. I'm like, I think I need to go back to my science fiction, my science fantasy, because I need to kill people and blow things up.
I know.
And,
it's good just to get it kind of out there, That's why you just take all those kind of those emotions that kind of build up in you and just find an outlet, And I think it's no different than a musician picking up a guitar, or kind of like a painter kind of like trying to express how they feel. As writers, that's something that we have to kind of tap into, and I think it's good to kind of use that kind of emotions to kind of drive a story, or I suppose drive some aspect of a story, So yeah, I definitely stand by you.
Well, I have a couple of things. I haven't had a chance, but I actually feel like I need to go back and read Big Red now that I've read Blood Red Sand.
Yeah. A few people have said that.
Get the characters, because I felt like I was just meeting the characters in Blood Red Sand, McCabe and some of the others. And because of the time difference, I wasn't like fitting them in where they fit in Dub's story.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So I am kind of excited to go back and go, oh my gosh, and connect the dots. But I really liked the characters in Blood Red Sand because, like I said, I didn't get to know them before. And Dub and his friends are almost shadows on the outside as the Black Masks. Yeah. And I was like, oh, which is cool. I don't even know where to start with my questions, because I want to know more about Majestic 12 and but I'm so I'm just telling you, here's what I want to know in whatever book you write next.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And I mean, I can certainly dive into that. So I think that was one of the things that I kind of wanted to do when I kind of sat down with Blood Red Sand, was to kind of explore some of the backstories of some of the secondary characters. So I kind of flipped the script a little bit in the sense that like the main characters in Big Red are the secondary kind of characters, or kind of make appearances or whatever. But it was all about kind of, I suppose, breathing life into some of the main kind of secondary characters in Big Red. So I think the two kind of big ones that kind of stand out would be the likes of Colonel Wellesley in Big Red, kind of giving him a backstory into why he is the way he is, and then exploring the I suppose what happened to Captain Lockhart to make him the way that he was, As in Big Red, we know him as like this completely drugged up, drunk kind of like maniac, but he's like one of the best pilots they have, So it's kind of exploring what happened to him to make him the way he was, and he is going to kind of feature in some of the future stories as well, So he is a character that I really loved. I even loved in the first book, but that's why I had to kind of give him something, I wanted to kind of, I suppose, give him this backstory essentially.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. And you cover a lot of hard topics in the midst of all these battle scenes, which I think is a real talent to be able to. I mean, you're telling us about the battle and all the carnage, but you're also focusing on, my mind just went blank. I'm sorry. You can tell it's 7 o'clock in the morning.
to me all the time.
But we're dealing with the Third Reich and the Jews and all of that conflict and turmoil, which affects your characters deeply, and that's kind of what drives them and pushes them to keep going when it just seems like, oh my gosh, I know I wouldn't have been there in the first place, but if I was that kind of person, just roll over and go, okay, this is just not working. So do you want to talk about why you wanted to look at that and focus on that? And
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, happy to. So I think that's one of the things I kind of explored with Big Red, and I kind of explored a bit more in this one, and it's kind of good and evil. So the way I kind of think about it is, right, I was raised in kind of World War II films. It's just one of those things, we just used to love watching them, and that type of stuff is very kind of clear cut. It's like the Allies are the good guys and the Nazis are the bad guys, and that's absolutely true. I think we all kind of agree with that. The thing that I think like terrifies me more than anything is what I call like the Scooby-Doo ending. If you kind of watch the Scooby-Doo cartoons, there's always a monster and there's like, a ghost or something like that haunting an area. But at the end of the story, it's always kind of revealed to be a human. It's never this big bad monster who's kind of like wrecking the place. It's a human being. I think that's something that terrifies me since kind of first learning about the Nazis when I was like in school. Is like, I think in your head you kind of you paint them as these monsters and these vampires and these kind of werewolves, but like a lot of them were like average day people, and that's something I just struggle to wrap my head around. Like how you could have people commit these terrible acts of genocide and still be kind of like be husbands and be fathers and kind of be members of the community. They're not kind of like people kind of twiddling their mustaches and kind of laughing nefariously. They're normal people, but they go on to commit like absolutely gruesome acts, and that's something that I think I struggle to wrap my head around, how a quote unquote normal person can go out and commit those actions. So I think with my writing, it's me trying to understand just pure evil, and how it can kind of take human form essentially. So that's something that kind of drove me on to kind of just like try and look at these characters, and I think one of the main kind of bad guys, like he's an SS kind of he's an SS kind of leader, and he's kind of like does these terrible kind of like experiments on people, and it's the way he kind of rationalizes it in his head, which I think scares me. Even kind of reading back on it, it's in his head he's doing the right thing. He doesn't sit there and think that I'm a bad guy, and that's how like people like that act. They find ways of justifying these terrible actions and build it into their own worldview to think that I'm doing the right thing. So he's going off kind of butchering people and kind of experimenting on people, but in his worldview he's doing it for the good of all humanity. That's how he's justifying it to himself, even though it's morally reprehensible. So yeah, I think I use it as an outlet for me to try and kind of understand just this absolute mad kind of evil that's in the world more than anything.
And I think it boils down to our choices, because you even show that the Allies, when they get the upper hand in some of these situations and they're thinking about all these horrible things that these Nazis have done, they struggle with that same darkness of wanting the revenge side of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which, a part of us could say, well, that's totally justifiable. They just did this, and I don't want to throw out any spoilers.
Yeah.
And I think we all struggle with that on some level, because we get in our mindset, this is the way the world should be, and I'm doing everything I can to make that. And yet, how do we stop and look at ourselves and go, okay, now I'm becoming like them? And I think you had a really good balance with your characters in the Allied forces struggling with that and finding kind of a new standing ground and where they were.
Absolutely. I think it's like you said, everyone kind of struggles with this stuff morally, like it's I think we see in our kind of everyday lives when you might kind of read about someone committing a despicable kind of crime or something like that, and your first instinct is let's hang them. They should be like hung or shot or that type of stuff, and then there's at the same time it comes back to the moral thing. Is that morally the right thing to do? Is it kind of, is that not against God's law type of stuff, So I suppose it's trying to look at it from all different angles. That like when we see kind of good and evil, it's not necessarily that clear cut. Like you take the Allies, not all of them are like the Captain Americas that I would have seen in kind of the World War kind of II movies. It's people. You've got good people and you've got bad people, and good people commit terrible actions and bad people commit good ones. So it's again just my exploration of good and evil to try and kind of wrap my head around it myself and try and understand it a little bit better. And I
Right.
probably take a lifetime trying to understand it as well, you know?
I think we all will, because obviously, if you look at different things going on in our world, you
Yep.
know, my country and everything, we haven't learned from the past, and we're making the same prejudicial, judgments and mistakes. And yeah, so I really enjoyed kind of digging into that. And it's so funny because you don't necessarily think about that till you're finished reading the book and you catch your breath, and then
Yeah.
you start thinking, you're like, wow, there was a lot packed in there.
Yeah, big time. Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to kind of just get as much as I could in there. Like, I didn't want it to just be like, all guns and blood and guts and stuff like that. I wanted to take the time to explore different aspects of not just good and evil, what it means to be a human type of stuff, and kind of prejudice that we have. You kind of, even you seen it in Big Red, where they had like a very, like, normal human beings had a very kind of like negative view of the native Martians, even though they might be kind of like pretty much related in terms of like biology. They despise them because they kind of come from a different planet type of stuff. So it's, again, we see it in our world where I don't like you because you were born here, or because you're from this country, or you have that type of religion. So it
Right.
is just trying to understand that. I think because, like, I've seen that type of stuff in my country, like when I was growing up, there was terrorist attacks from different kind of organizations just based purely on religion. And it's something that I suppose stayed with me. Now, thankfully, I never kind of experienced that stuff. It took place like 200 kilometers north of me, but it's still grown up every day and kind of like reading newspapers and seeing it on the TV, these horrible bomb attacks, like civilians being targeted and kind of killed just because of like a historical disagreement. And thankfully things have gotten much, much better nowadays, that, we're all technically on the same side and everyone kind of gets along, but it's horrible to kind of remember, and it's terrifying to think that just a few kind of actions can set that all off again. And that's not just here in Ireland, it's everywhere
Right.
throughout the world. And like you said, we're still struggling to kind of learn from the past. And I think as long as we keep trying to better ourselves, as long as we keep trying to learn and trying to push ourselves forward, that's all we can kind of ask for at this point. And I'm sure at some point we will kind of get there. We will kind of come together as an international community, one way or another. I do think it's possible.
We sure hope so, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, that's kind of a good segue into the other area of questions, because in this
Okay.
book we don't get to see a lot of the Mars people, but that phrase does show up, the "we have always been here."
Yeah.
And that's like the big question mark that I'm like, okay, that's the, and I know you probably can't answer that because you need to save that for the books, but just know that that whole thought of "we have always been here" really resonates. So I don't know how you came up with that one line, but in both books, every time, that's something that I have internally felt kind of in connection with what we've been talking about, with learning to accept each other and to become an international community, to kind of, and it's so hard because I don't want to say we have to stop seeing our differences, because those make
Yep.
us stronger. You don't
Yeah,
want to stop
absolutely.
seeing the cultural differences or race, because that has made us who we are.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you want to say, but that's not how you judge a person, and that's
Yeah.
not how you go into interacting with them. So I don't know, and I don't know why that is. I don't know, so I don't know if there's anything you can share with us on, without spoilers. I know that's really put you on the spot there.
Don't worry. Don't worry.
How you even came
Yeah,
up with that.
I honestly, I don't know. I think the first time it's mentioned is that part in Big Red after Doug tries to rescue his friend. She tries to commit suicide in the airlock, and she sets off
Yes.
a grenade. I think that was the first time I referenced it, and it was one of those lines that kind of came to my head, but it kind of stayed with me then. And I suppose I tried to kind of look at it from different angles. And I suppose if you ask 10 different readers what it means to them, you get 10 different answers. And the same with the characters. They do kind of have differing interpretations of what that means. Like some of them believe that we've always been here means that like humanity's always been on the planet Mars. Others mean that like we've always been in this type of situation in terms of kind of war. Others kind of believe that they're kind of reliving the same events over and over again. So it really is kind of like it's up to the individual to kind of make it what it means to them, essentially. But there is, I suppose I have an answer that I'm not going to go into here because I'm saving it for a future book when it will all kind of come out. But at the minute, I'm kind of saying, like, whatever kind of it means to you, you know, I suppose explore that. But if you want any more kind of in-depth information, look back on any time that it's referenced and see what the characters are talking about, and that's the best kind of clue I can give to you or any other readers as to what it means, you know. But it will, you know, I'm building up to what it all means.
That's excellent. That's all I need to know. I can rest peacefully now and wait till next year, the year after, whenever something else comes. And because it's a great phrase that does have multiple meanings, like you said, to the different characters and in the story, because all of those could be right.
Exactly, you know, exactly. And like that, I mean, you could have already said it here on the show, the correct answer. It's just I can't confirm or deny it. So I'm leaving it open to interpretation, because I love kind of creating these open loops where I'm not necessarily answering every single, you know, question that's been asked in the book. I do want kind of people to kind of think about it themselves and come up with their own answers, and then maybe they want to come back to me on it. I might kind of let them know if they get it once they kind of read it. Who knows?
Yeah, once you've found your ending.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I do know how it's going to end. I've got all the books kind of mapped out. It's just a matter of actually sitting down and kind of writing them. Like I said, I've struggled a bit with the direct sequel to Big Red, and I think it was just because I wasn't in the mindset for it. But, you know, I do know what the ending is, and if you look back on some of the different scenes, it's hinted at very, very strongly what it's all building up to, and it is going to rear its ugly head in the next book or two. So just stand by you for that.
I'm excited.
Brilliant, thank you.
So let's go back to Dub and his friends with the black visors. I don't know how much you can share, because obviously that's going to come back, because this is the timeline, wibbly wobbly, timey wimey stuff, as the Doctor would say, which is awesome. Anytime you can reference the Doctor to time travel,
that's a win.
Definitely. But I loved, for me, you know, they're just kind of there, barely their shadows the whole time. But in their last scene, where they give just a hint, I mean, it is, but that scene in my head just totally sticks out. And I know we can't talk in detail because it's toward the end, but that whole scene of them leaving, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the character's name they came to save. And I should, because she's so important.
Anna Bailey.
You know, that whole scene was so impactful, and probably because we'd seen all these battle scenes, and then it's not a quiet scene, but it's not, I don't know how to explain what I'm saying, but just the juxtaposition of that scene and kind of the quiet references that are made as they're leaving.
Yeah.
You know, our readers can't see, I'm like, thumbs up. Okay, I don't know. It was awesome.
Thank you. And I did want to have that in there specifically to answer some of the questions that, like, I'm sure people were kind of asking at that point. And I suppose from the characters, the Black Visors perspective, a lot has kind of changed for them since the end of Big Red. So it's not, interestingly enough, not too much time has passed. So from their perspective, I think I have it like 3 days after the end of Big Red, but it's kind of all the things that's happened to them within those 3 days kind of reveals a lot. And that's pretty much like the opening kind of chapters of kind of Born Red, is exploring that a little bit and realizing that there's a lot more kind of going on than I suppose people are aware of, you know. And even I've kind of hinted at it a little bit, but there's a specific reason why those characters were selected for the Mars occupation force in the first book. And I've never kind of explored it, but that's the one thing I will say. It's not just random chance that these people happen to be taken there. It's something that's kind of going on a good bit. And I think it's going to be explored, like definitely in Big Red, or sorry, in Born Red in the sequel, but you're going to see hints of it then in the books set in the kind of Blood Red Sand kind of timeline, as well, as it's kind of gradually building up to the official kind of hollow program being used by the Mars occupation force type of stuff. So it's, I think both kind of narratives will definitely explore it, but yeah, it is coming. You know, I will definitely be delving into it.
It's so funny. You're talking, I'm thinking it's all connected. That's another show I've been binge watching. It's all connected.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Okay, so we've talked a lot about the books, but let's
Yep.
let's talk about you. Let's spend a few minutes and explore, other than writing, what have you been doing this last year? I know, how's Ireland handling the COVID situation? Are you coming out of the pandemic as well, or?
Yeah. I mean, we had a very rough year in terms of it, like especially when it started kicking in. But it's surprisingly we don't really have, or we didn't really have a lot of faith in our kind of government at all. I mean, I suppose like a lot of countries kind of feel like that as well, But they weren't the best, They're like historically they were kind of guilty of a lot of stuff, But it's probably the one thing they handled right was the pandemic, and that's something that I think their approval rating went through the roof over, because they tend not to do good stuff or kind of do good work or deliver on their promises and stuff. But they actually made the one right decision, and I think it was. Based on the fact that they were kind of looking at Italy, and they were seeing the kind of the debt rates kind of spiral, and they said, right, this is actually serious. Maybe we should start following some of the advice that we're receiving, and they did that. And I think that the actions that they took prevented like a lot of deaths, and bringing in the social distancing kind of programs and kind of locking down parts of the country to kind of stop it. So now midway through, we ended up having an election, and we've got now a coalition government. So the old government plus the new kind of parties kind of melded in together, and I think we're not as happy now as we were. And I think because there's all that internal kind of politics and stuff, and promises kind of not being delivered, and people demanding action, But I think overall as a country we've come together very, very strongly. Like we've prioritized the vaccination of our most kind of vulnerable citizens, so the likes of the elderly and the sick. They're very, very high on the vaccination rates. Slow for the rest of the population, but I think we are heading in the right direction. Most of the economy has been kind of reopened now, as of the last couple of weeks. We're still waiting on the ability to kind of have indoor drinks in pubs. So it's something I'm definitely really, really looking forward to. But I mean, that's probably a few weeks off now. I think they were talking about opening it up over the next, I think, week or 2 weeks. But we're starting to get advice to say that maybe it's probably going to have to wait another couple of weeks after that. But overall, we were definitely heading in the right direction. We've managed to kind of crush the virus for the most part, and right now we're just waiting for everyone to get vaccinated, and hopefully things can get back to normal then a little bit, or the new normal as they call it. So,
Right, the
we'll
new
see.
normal. And it's so funny because you've just kind of crushed my hopes. And ever since my trip to Ireland, I'm like, I would move to Dublin in a heartbeat because I had such a great time. But obviously I didn't get to see all the political side and all those kind of things. But I do remember, I mean, every day right after work, the pubs were full. People are out on the, street in front of it because they can't all fit inside. And but it was just like this happy kind of feeling. So I hope you guys can get that back soon, because
We really want it back. I think we've earned it now at this stage after like 15 months of kind of lockdown. I think they let us out around September, October last year, but that was about it,
Yeah.
So I think after 15 months, we all just want to go back and have a few points and have a bit of a laugh, and make fools of ourselves out in the streets. And we're getting there. We're close.
Well, what I loved, it maybe it's because it was still early in the afternoon. I never saw like any drunken craziness. It was just like happy people having a good time unwinding.
It tends to be like that in the day, and then it just slowly kind of worsens going into the night. It's just
that's probably how it is all over the world.
Yeah, so absolutely.
Oh.
Yeah, getting there.
So did you find after several months in the pandemic, you found a new groove for your writing? Because obviously you finished the book during that time.
Yeah.
So what did you find worked for you?
I think it was like anything. It was adapting to a different situation. Like I kind of my work essentially got busier because we were in one of those. Like I work as a planning analyst for a major kind of broadband and TV kind of provider, which was deemed essential because obviously people are locked down, so they need their internet to work from home, and they need their TV to keep them from entertained, or else there'd be riots on the streets, especially with no pubs. So my work got considerably kind of busier. So I was kind of very, very kind of flat out in terms of like every single day, just loads to do. No, I love my job. I have to say, I'm very, very lucky in the sense that like I enjoy it, and I look forward to kind of going into it. So at least there's no kind of dread there. But in terms of the writing, it was like my routine was just smashed completely, because I was used to kind of doing the bulk of my work when my children were in school, but with the schools kind of locked down, it was like limited time. So I basically managed to kind of do a large quantity of my writing in these kind of moments when I have silence with the children. So say, for example, they're two very young kids, they're like 7 and 6, but they're constantly running around, constantly playing games, constantly fighting and making noise and stuff like that. But you might get like a bit of silence, say for 20 minutes when they're having their breakfast in the mornings, in which case I'm churning out a couple of hundred words. I'm sitting beside them just typing kind of furiously. Again, same around dinner time and around evening time when they're having kind of like a snack or something like that. I might get 15 or 20 minutes. On the work front, I've been working a lot through my lunch, so I get a 40-minute lunch every day, and I literally, as soon as my lunch break kicks in, it's like straight on the laptop, boom, 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 which is handy because like I've been working from home the whole time, so it's not like I have to kind of, in a physical kind of like office space. I can just literally reach over to the laptop, turn it on, and bash out like 1,000 words in 40 minutes. So I think that's what's kind of kept me going. It's trying to adapt to a new way of doing things. Whereas beforehand, I would have desperately needed silence to do any writing. I had to be like in the zone, focused, everyone's silent. Now it's like I can do it with like two kids kind of shouting and fighting, and with a time limit, no one have to get back to work. So yeah, just adapted.
I see, and I love that you said that, because we're talking all the time on the podcast about figuring out what works for you. But as you said, that changes over time depending on the situation, and you just have to try different things until it works. And exactly. So I love that you were able to do that.
Yeah, well, I think I had no other option to it, it's like with the kids there full time, as opposed to having a couple of hours peace and quiet. It really was like, when am I going to get it done? Because I find my energy levels drop the later in the day we go. So I'm very productive towards the early part of the day, but come evening time, I can barely do anything. So say if I were to leave it till when they go to bed, I wouldn't be able to kind of do as many as I'd like to, or do as many words as I'd like to. So it is looking at these pockets of availability and utilizing them as much as possible, because I love writing, and that's all I really want to do all day long if I could, So as soon as I become an international bestseller, I'll have it sorted, But until then, I have to just write through my lunch.
Yeah, that is so funny, because just recently I was talking to a couple of different people saying, I wish I could just write. I don't want to have to think about marketing. I don't want to have to think about
exactly
all the things that go with the entrepreneurial part. I just want to write and forget the rest of the world. So
yeah, and I think that is the dream.
It is the dream. Well, you will have to let us know when you have to get off, because you're probably still working today. But
no, I've got loads of time. I did specifically make sure I had all the time to work for this. So yeah,
good.
No problem.
I didn't want to keep you for that, but thank you for keeping the internet and TV running in your country, because I know here that's been a total lifesaver.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't know if you guys had the same problem, but in my house for a while, all my kids had come home from college.
Yeah.
So we would have 2 kids doing college courses online. My husband was working from home.
Yeah.
And then, I had 2 other kids, and my mom also lives with us. So we had 7 people on our internet. And my poor husband would be, everything was over Zoom calls, and he would come out and go, everybody get off the internet. I have to present. Because he'd get kicked off.
Yeah, so, been there.
So we appreciate all the work that went behind the scenes to keep internet up and running and doing the best that it could.
It's the glue that held kind of society together more than anything, a fast and stable broadband connection.
Yeah, that and Netflix. Any kind of TV streaming.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I can only imagine what it would have been like without that type of stuff, Yeah, riots.
Well, maybe we wouldn't have gained so much weight. We would have been outside doing something. Maybe, I don't know.
But still, it's allowed. It's allowed. Yeah. It's pandemic.
Yeah. Well, and I at least live in the woods. People in big cities, there's really nowhere you could have gone.
Yeah, geez, that must have been very, very tough, because we're lucky. I live in a big suburban area in the south of Dublin, but the mountains are just literally right over there. So, nice. And that's probably one of the one thing that kind of stays with me about the pandemic. Lockdown kind of started kicking in a few days before St. Patrick's Day, which is just unheard of over here. So the concept of having no parades, no kind of pubs on St. Patrick's Day, it's crazy. Well, it was crazy to us back then when it was first starting, but it was strange as in like an act of solidarity on St. Patrick's Day. Everyone went up to the mountains and just stood socially distanced now. But it was like we all came together in the only way we knew how, even in a socially distanced kind of way, which really kind of struck home with me. Like, we were all kind of dressed up in the tricolour and waving the flag, and we couldn't have a parade and we couldn't have our points, so we all just wanted to come together anyway in the safest way we knew how. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, that sounds really cool, because like you do start to feel that need for other people again, and to feel like even if you can't hug them or shake their hand or, be all together close, but to just know, okay, I'm not alone. My countrymen are still here with me.
Yeah.
We still enjoy the same things. We still want the same things. So that was probably a really special moment.
Absolutely. It did. It resonated, and it was the same again this year for St. Patrick's Day. We again couldn't have a parade, and again we couldn't go to the points or go for our points or go to the pubs or anything. But we just went out to the fields and we went out to the parks, and again everyone socially distanced, but kind of waving the flag around and kind of shouting as loud as we could, and kind of like just friendly smiles and nods at each other. So it was really nice. It was really nice. Hopefully we'll have a parade next year. Fingers crossed.
Yes. Oh my goodness, that kind of makes me sad too. I know there are pockets of that in the United States, but it just seems like people struggle so much here to just love each other and feel like you're on the same side.
Yeah, look, it's everywhere, I suppose, like there's no one country on this planet where everybody gets along and, we're all best friends. I think as long as individual citizens, as we try and do our best for our community and for each other and kind of like for our kind of countries, that's all we can really do. As long as you can kind of look at yourself in the mirror and think, I'm being the best person that I can be, and I'm being the best member of my community that I can be. That's ultimately the goal of it all. Hopefully we can, I suppose, persuade enough people to move in the right direction, to step away from like the hatred and the kind of anger that's just been festering there, or what I call the emotionalism of it, rather kind of being emotional about the likes of politics, is looking at the logical stone cold facts of it, But I think as long as we try as individuals, we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I agree. And that's something we can always hope for.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. So what do you want to talk about? Like, I've talked a lot, asked my questions, but is there anything on your mind that you're like, let's talk about this?
I suppose the only thing that I really enjoy talking about is and I've mentioned it, I think I actually probably mentioned on the last kind of podcast as well, but I go out of my way to bring it up as much as kind of possible, and it's the likes of military service. I've spoken about it and kind of done interviews on multiple occasions, and I constantly, I suppose, I'm appreciative of the 7 years I spent as a reservist in the Reserve Defence Forces here in Ireland, and it was like in the infantry, and it was a weapons specialist towards the end of that term. But it's something that I really, really enjoyed, and I always kind of encourage as many people as possible, especially kind of young people who might be kind of considering doing something like that. Not necessarily kind of enlisting full time if you're uncertain, but at the very least, join the reserves of whatever you're kind of interested in. I just look back at it and I have so many fond memories of being like a young person and kind of learning all these skills that still are with me to this day.
Yeah.
Like I've learned lessons when I was 17 about, that I suppose I still utilize in my kind of personal and professional life. And I don't think I would have learned those lessons if it had not been for joining the Defence Forces. So it's something I'm very, very kind of grateful for. I've so many experiences that I could spend all day talking about them, but it just wouldn't do it justice. You have to kind of see them and live through them to believe it, But yeah, that's my one kind of main talking point, is like to anybody kind of listening. If you're a young person yourself, or what kind of young person looking for something different, we used to have a slogan over here. It was called "A Life Less Ordinary," and that was the kind of slogan for the Defence Forces. But yeah, it's that type of stuff, like learning kind of lifelong skills and making friendships that you'll have for decades, and playing with guns as well, in a safe kind of manner. That was a big driving thing for us. It's like, because we obviously have a very kind of strict gun control policy over here. You can own weapons, but it's very hard to kind of gain access to them, and due to kind of health and safety kind of legislation and stuff like that, it's mainly kind of like farmers or kind of people with land who'd have them to kind of protect their kind of properties and stuff. But yeah, when it comes to like semi-automatic weaponry, that doesn't exist over here, so it's the chance to actually play with it. Again, you have a lifelong respect for kind of weaponry like that then as well, so but yeah, to anyone who's listening, national service, it's fantastic.
I will totally agree with that. My brother did 20 years in the Air Force, and
well done.
In 2019 into 2020, we had an international exchange student from the Netherlands.
Oh, cool.
great kid, super nice.
Yeah.
He went home. He's very social. So
Yeah.
trying to do school, university online was really hard for him. And he's like,
Yeah.
I just don't like it. So he joined the Dutch Navy.
Oh,
And,
great.
he sends us pictures, and it is so weird to see this happy, huge smile on his face kid with his big gun and his gear and, all these things. But he is having a blast. And he's getting his schooling, his training through that.
Brilliant.
And so, I totally agree that there are so many positive things that can come from that service. And I know I'm very grateful for everyone that has served
Absolutely
our country.
Yeah, 100%. Fair play to people who can actually kind of step up and do it. It's fantastic. And I think I struggle to kind of wrap my head around how they can willingly put their lives on the line for their community, and how they can just willingly kind of accept it to do that, and it's a different kind of mindset, so rather than kind of like take, they're just giving everything. They're going through this sometimes brutal training, put in these horrible kind of situations. It's mind blowing. So I think we could thank them till the cows come home, but it's still not going to be enough for the people who were out there making a difference, and kind of keeping us all safe, and I suppose participating in different kind of missions through the UN type of stuff. So fair play to each and every one of them.
Yeah, especially when so many people aren't grateful and are very vocal.
I'll never be able to wrap my head around. I can understand being frustrated at a situation, but like targeting veterans and kind of serving members of the military, it's just it's a no fly with me. I mean, you can disagree with government policy, and you can disagree with kind of any kind of policy or law that you like. I mean, that's the whole beauty of a democracy. But to kind of target people who are out there kind of making a difference and not getting thanked, and in some cases not getting paid what they deserve to get paid, that just never makes sense to me in a million years.
Yeah, boy, if we get into stuff that doesn't make sense, we'll be here all day.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my goodness.
We'll save it for the next show.
Yeah, right.
Set the world to rights.
Okay, so you said Born Red is the one that's in planning to come out next, or is that just in that lineup?
It's in the lineup. I think right now I'm just curious to see what the reaction is to Blood Red Sand, because it's so different to Big Red. And I think if there's a bit of an outcry, or like people are loving it a lot more than kind of Big Red, I'll do the sequel to that first. Whereas if it's kind of mixed or it's 50-50, I'll go back to the Born Red. So literally it's just a matter of kind of waiting to the 6th of July, give it maybe a week after, once I kind of gauge people's interest, and kind of if people are asking me questions a lot more, or kind of querying it, then I'll make the decision. But like, I mean, I'm going to bring those books out. It's just a matter of what order.
When.
More than nothing.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Just a matter of when.
Awesome. Okay, so we know we have Born Red to look forward to. So what would be the title of the flip side if you chose to do the other one, the sequel to Blood Red?
Oh, be Blood Red Steel. That's the working title at the minute.
Blood Red Steel. Okay.
Now, subject to change, but that's the kind of thoughts I had in that. And I've got the story all mapped out, and it was hinted, well, not hinted at, but I kind of delved into a little bit in. There's actually an axed part 6 of Blood Red Sand that kind of deals with the events after everything that you've read in the book. I sent it on to my publisher, and she liked it, but it was just kind of like, right, maybe we should give it a bit more of a natural ending, because it went from the ending that to delving into events about a year and a half later, and it was just one chapter kind of dedicated to building up to this epic battle that was referenced in Big Red, called the Siege of Forward Base Zulu. And Dub actually overhears kind of people talking about when he first arrives in kind of New Berlin. When he's on the train station, there's 2 corporals talking to each other, and they're like, "Oh, I haven't seen you since like Forward Base Zulu," and they all go kind of silent and look away, and he's like, "I wonder what the hell that's all about." But that's what I kind of want to explore in Blood Red Steel, is like this pivotal kind of battle in this growing kind of war, and it's going to have some of the characters from Blood Red Sand in it in a different phase in their careers, and introduce a whole range of kind of new characters as well. So I'm looking forward to doing that one.
Yes, when you're all done, you're going to have like this companion guide of all the characters and timelines. And your timeline is not going to be this, it's going to be all these wiggly lines connecting here and there, which
I do. I have to send that on to my publisher, or I did for Blood Red Sand, and it was just like, this bit is a reference to this mention in Big Red, and this is a reference to this, and this is why that's there, and that's building into this, and that ties into this bit of dialogue in Big Red and stuff like that. So something like that does kind of exist now at the minute. But yeah, I'd say once I get through it all,
yes.
yeah, I will have to kind of do an overview for everybody.
Well, and people will buy it because I'm the kind of person that, okay, so I'm a Trekkie, and I would buy all the companions, and I bought like the technical guide for the Enterprise, and
Cool.
I would look at it and go, I have no idea what any of this means, but it's really
Yeah,
cool.
exactly. It's good to have, just in case. Yeah. Yeah, that is kind of living the dream, and I did I'm toying with the idea of doing like a filler kind of mini book in between the events of kind of Blood Red Sand and kind of Blood Red Steel, just to cover like some of the bits that we'll kind of gloss over, but they're kind of pivotal kind of scenes as well. So I had kind of thought about maybe doing a novella type thing maybe, but I'm toying around with it. But we'll see. We'll see.
Well, if nothing else, write it down, and then someday in the future may go, oh, I know what to do with this now.
Yeah, exactly.
That way it's all down.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, Damien, I just love talking with you. You're so easy to talk to.
Thank you.
And we haven't even talked about writing details.
Yeah.
But it's just fun to see someone out there doing it and having fun doing it, because I know a lot of times my husband will tell me, why are you writing? Every time you talk about it, you sound miserable. And I'm like, it's not the writing part. It's the marketing and the selling part I hate, So it's just fun. Every time I see you on Instagram or anywhere, you've just always got your big smile, and it just looks like you're having a blast. So I appreciate that.
No, that's good to hear. And yeah, absolutely. I think it's because I love what I'm doing. And I'm the type of person who I never really knew what I wanted to do in life, especially growing up. I didn't I wasn't like I was 8 years old and saying, oh, I want to be a writer, I wanted to be all sorts of different things, and I worked all different types of jobs. And even as I said, I'm very, very happy in the career that I'm in now. But at the same time, I want to write. I just love it so much. I've never felt this passion for something like for anything kind of quote unquote work related before. So yeah, I'm passionate about sticking with it, and like that, if it takes like 5 years, 10 years, 100 years, I'm on my deathbed before I make it, I'll do it, because to me it's a win-win.
Yes.
I'm doing something that I enjoy doing. And even if I never get to where I want to be, I'll still be able to look back on my life and say, you know what, I'm actually very satisfied with that. I have a great family. Like, I've worked a job pretty much my entire kind of working life. And like in my past time, I just wrote books, so that to me is like a win-win-win. So, yeah.
Oh, goodness. Well, that's pretty much all I have. So this, like I said, this is your chance to just share whatever you want with people. I know we've talked about the military service.
Yep. Yeah, happy to kind of share.
Yeah.
So I mean, I suppose the one kind of thing I
was gonna say, most of my questions would be like, tell me spoilers, and I'm like, I can't ask that. So I'm trying to be very good, and I'm trying to be patient. No pressure.
Yeah, and look, like you will have like all the answers. It's a matter of when, more than anything, when I feel like kind of getting them out there and answering them, might tag them along for another book or two, But
no, I think that's great.
Yeah, I think it kind of like people love those kind of hooks in it as well, and it does create that kind of level of interest, rather than it just be cut and dry. That question something in book one and give you the ending or the answers in book one. I kind of wanted to expand on it, because there's a whole universe to what I'm doing. And even like I've got a couple of spin-offs kind of planned, like one of the projects that I got a green light off my publisher on the back of another kind of interview I did a while back, but I kind of mentioned how I'd love to explore the American kind of zone of occupation. Because as I've kind of referenced in the books, it's split up. Mars itself is kind of split up into 5 occupational zones, and like Big Red kind of deals with more the European side of stuff, whereas there is references to an American zone. So that is an area that I really, really want to dive into. And I mentioned whatever interview was on, I kind of mentioned saying that I had this name for it, and it was called the Red Young Guns, where it focused on a bunch of like American teenagers who were abducted from their lives back in America and had their minds wiped, and they were kind of being trained to be like the elite soldiers. So whereas in Big Red they were just the regular grunts, ground troops, these are like the best of the best special forces. Had no recollection of their lives back in America, are just like used as a counterinsurgency force, and it's kind of dealing with normal teenagers who don't really have a clue what's going on with them, and then slowly they're kind of question their existence, but then kind of turn against their kind of occupiers and become like a, I suppose like a, I don't want to say a terrorist group, but they're kind of like, you know, the Wild West kind of bandits, where they're just living their own lives and they don't care for authority, and they're not necessarily bad guys. They just want to be free of like government kind of, you know, authority and stuff like that. So, but yeah, I think I got about 16,000 words into that story, and I really loved it. But I kind of decided to put it on hold because it's a bit of like a domino thing. If I wrote it, it wouldn't make sense because I hadn't written Born Red. And I can't write Born Red until I know how Blood Red Sand is going down. So it's kind of, there's no point kind of releasing a new kind of like spin-off without kind of at least some of the answers or questions being answered in which I could answer in those two books. So I had to kind of like put a bit of a needle in it, you know, and I was really loving it as well. But it was like, you know, they're talking about things that, you know, haven't really been explored, so I can't really, you know, it doesn't make sense, and I don't think it would make sense from a reader's point of view if they're kind of like only reading these like Big Red and then Blood Red Sand, and they're like, when's he ever going to write a sequel to anything, you know? So I was like,
yes. Well, we appreciate that because, like I said, we have those answers. But that is like really smart of you too, though, to think I have these other offshoots I can do.
Yeah.
I just have to be patient and finish the one. So
yeah, it's kind of like I didn't want to tie myself down with just one idea, and I suppose I like experimenting with different kind of styles as well. Like there was the first person in Big Red and third person in Blood Red Sand, so it's constantly kind of tweaking how I write things. I don't want to just do the same format over and over again. So the likes of even Red Young Guns, it was told in the present tense, first person present. So rather than it being a recollection, it was like, this is happening to me right now, you know, which I think from my perspective was a bit chilling, because you're dealing with these not grown adults, but they're teenagers. I think the opening chapter was an exercise where they're being tested as the new generation of Hollows, and it's just this young girl. I think I had her at about 16, but she's ordered to like kill her best friend in a fight to the death, and it's just real brutal. Like from her perspective, she's trying to, I suppose, walk a balance between like following these orders, but also murdering someone she cares about, type of thing, you know. So it's probably again exploring the darkness, but it's just, it felt very kind of visceral to be writing it in it. I'm doing this right now. I have my hands over her throat and I'm watching the life drain from her eyes, you know, when she's 16. So
to get into that psychology and
it's just tricky, because I've never really kind of done an in the moment type of story. It's always a reflection. And you know, even like Big Red, when Dub kind of looks back on some of the actions that he's done, like in particular it was after the Riker Rebellion, when they went in and they just committed all sorts of atrocities against kind of civilians, just in retaliation for their own dead. And it's, you can feel that darkness in him, but he's only recalling it, you know. He's kind of looking back on what he did the day before, and there's a little hint of kind of guilt maybe, but you know, he's not doing it in the moment, which I think always stayed with me as like, Jesus, that would probably be more horrible if he's describing it as he's doing it, you know. Which was the inspiration for that scene for Red Young Guns. But like I said, I'll get to it at some point.
Yes. Well, and I love the Young Guns part. Totally puts me in a Wild West.
That's what I was aiming for.
So perfect.
I did want to be like a kind of a Western sci-fi type of thing, you know, where it starts off with the military aspect, but they for whatever reasons they eventually kind of decide to rebel and do their own thing, you know. You know, it has this Wild West kind of feel as they're, you know, kind of hitting back at their former masters, but at the same time just want to be free. They're just teenagers who want to live their lives, you know.
Well, there's so much for us to look forward to. I'm excited about it. And we'll just keep our ears and eyes open so that when you pop up and go, hey, okay, this is what I'm doing and here's when it's coming, we will be ready for it, and we'll make sure we share it on the
absolutely.
On the
well, I'd say it'll be in the next couple of weeks where I kind of like announce what I'm actually working on now more than anything. So in the meantime, I'm working on a completely unrelated whip and nothing to do with Big Red or the Big Red universe, but I want to kind of get that finished first, and then I'll kind of make the decision on what's coming next. And knowing how I work, I'm just, as soon as I make that decision and I know what's going to work, I'll just dive straight into it and I'll have something ready to go in about 4 months, give or take, you know.
So that's wonderful. So do you want to talk about that unnamed, unrelated whip that you just Can
Absolutely.
you?
Yeah, of course can. Yeah, it's again, like I mentioned, I like to experiment as much as possible. So I don't want to kind of get bogged down in just the one genre the whole time. But no, for the record, I absolutely love writing military science fiction. If I can get bestseller status, I'd be happy with kind of like writing those books for the rest of my life. At the same
Yes.
time, I like to mix things up a little bit. So I've never read much horror. I love horror movies now, for the record.
Okay.
Absolutely, could sit down and watch them all day long. But I'd never read too much up until recently, and I just had this idea for a story that just really kind of just when it kind of buries deep into your brain, and kind of you can't let it go. But it's a
Yeah.
science fiction horror story set following this crew, just a normal kind of crew of like a supply ship on their way to a colony, and they come across this long lost kind of vessel, that's kind of really infamous, in the sense that like it was supposed to carry a bunch of these rich people to a new planet to found their own kind of colony, but it went missing. And it's kind of like based on, I suppose, seaborne legends here on Earth, where you every now and again you'll hear a story about a ship going missing, and then it comes out. So it's under the working title of The Dead Marie, and it's based on the name of the ship is the Marie Celeste, or sorry, the Marie Antoinette, which is based on the Marie Celeste kind of story,
Yeah.
So it's kind of just following this crew. They find the ship, and all sorts of weird stuff starts happening. So it's I won't say too much more than that, but yeah, it's the first time where I would have written a book where there's not like a big explosion in the first scene. People are
Yeah.
getting machine gunned to death. It's kind of like exploring this ship that they can make a load of money off of, but there's
Yeah.
also weird goings on, and the captain's starting to act very, very strange and stuff, So
See,
yeah.
that's totally something else I would read. So
Thank
yay.
you. Yeah, stand by. Watch the space.
Yes. And once you get through all the big red and blood red and all
Yeah.
that good stuff, we could look forward to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, Damien,
Definitely.
thank you so much for being with us today. Like I said, you're one of my favorite authors to talk to because you're so easy
Thank
to
you.
talk
Thank you
to,
very
and
much.
we love happy, positive people.
Absolutely. Life's too short.
Well, we will make sure everybody knows. My guess is this podcast will come out right about the time that Blood Red Sand is releasing. So hopefully people
Brilliant.
will go out and grab it. I'll make sure that my
Fingers crossed.
review is posted on Amazon as well because I
Thank you for
really
that.
enjoyed it.
That's brilliant. And cheers. Thank you very much for taking the time. And again, thank you for having me on the show. Like, I love just having sitting down and having chats about all things writing. So it's been an absolute pleasure as always. And thank you very much to everyone out there who's listening to this interview and who's watching on YouTube and so forth. But thanks very much. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. I am going to